Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of my Pseudo-Servants video. If you have not already, go check out part 1 for an introduction to the topic and the first half of the listed Pseudo-Servants in FGO. I would, however, like to make some corrections in the first video and add on to some things I had said. For one, the list I made comes from the Type Moon Wikipedia, and after posting, I noticed that some servants labeled as Pseudo-Servants in-game are not listed as such on the wiki, and vice versa. Examples of this are that the Collide girls are all labeled as Pseudo-Servants in-game, but not on the wiki. Summer Kiara is labeled as one on the wiki, but not in-game. So, here are all the characters labeled as Pseudo-Servants in-game that are not on the Wikipedia, and you will see a pattern with all of them. Ilya, Miyu, Kuro, both Shikis, Fujino, and Gray. A common thread between all of them is that they do not harbor servants inside of them. They harbor themselves inside of them. It's complicated. The real answer is that we thought about it and gave an explanation, but in reality we just want them in the game as they appear in their own stories, rather than a shifted version of their existence. The in-game answer has everything to do with how the Chaldea summoning system acts, and this should also partially answer the question posed to me of how multiple of the same vessel can coexist. If I am understanding it correctly, Chaldeus will summon a servant based on the servant record in the system, meaning that when a servant is summoned, they will be summoned in that recorded form. I used this example in the last video as well, but take Ivan the Terrible for example. He appears in his mammoth form in Chaldea despite him being a Lost Belt bastardization that is actually one of my favorite designs. I believe it is hinted at in the 2021 JP Christmas event that Ivan even poses the question as to why he looks like that. So, with that in mind, when we encounter, say, Ilya in the Prisma Cosmos event, we will summon her based on that form. But when we encounter Sitonai, she is a different Ilya altogether. That said, however, sometimes we don't actually summon the servants, they just follow us back to Chaldea and are labeled as a pseudo-servant, as is the case for Kuro. This also has to do with where the vessel is taken from. The Caster Ilya comes from the Collide universe, and Sitonai Ilya comes from the Fate Stay Night universe. Servants choosing to manifest in a host are able to decide which version of their host to inhabit, essentially making it easier if one version's personality gels better with them than another, like Kama taking Dark Sakura. That is another thing that needs correction in the previous video. People pointed out to me that Kama took the Dark Sakura persona for the sole purpose of harassing Parvati, who is inhabiting a version of Sakura as well. So, I hope that clears things up just a tad onto how the hosts are taken and why, and how multiples can be summoned. Short answer, marketing. Long answer, it varies from case to case. I will not be updating this list to add the other servants who are labeled as pseudo-servants because the explanation as to how they appear and what they inhabit is going to be the exact same all around, so you can basically apply that principle to all of them. But the 8 that we do have left are Odin, Parvati, Muramasa, Ryogi Shiki, Sima Yi, Shitonai, Yao Bikuni, and Zhuge Liang. Like last time, I'll be examining who the historical figure is, why they are possessing them, how this merger affects them, and an overall compatibility assessment. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to be starting off strong with a spoiler character. Normally, I would avoid something like this as it pertains directly to the story, but unfortunately the FGO community loved this story section so much that they spoiled a huge chunk of it for me against my will, this character included. So, if you want to save yourself from that, go ahead and skip. Odin, the chief god of Norse mythology, has merged with Ku and become a caster class, kind of. If you will remember, all the way back to your first time playing FGO, who the very first friendly servant you ever encountered was that wasn't Mosh. It was a familiar fate face, Kuhulan, but not as a lancer, a caster. This is explained in-game originally by this being an older version of Ku who took up the druidic way, becoming someone who guides others and illuminates the path ahead. This is in fact bullshit, and in reality, Odin, foreseeing the tragedy that Geisha had planned, decided to intervene, approaching Ku with a proposition in Fuyuki just before our arrival in the first singularity. He granted Ku his authority, and changed him to a caster in order to guide the coming master of humanity on the right path. Ku, as many of you know, is more so known as the wielder of Gai Bolg, and being the strongest warrior in all of Ulster. Ku is normally a bit more brash, much like a delinquent, but with a heart of gold. I don't rightfully know why he was chosen by Odin, outside of both of them being famous spear wielders, but their personalities are hardly similar. So I believe it has to do with Ku being a practitioner of runic magic that he has learned from Skahak, who has a connection with Skadi, a Norse goddess. Regardless as to why, Ku is interesting in that he is labeled as a proxy to Odin, not just a pseudo-servant. What weight does this have upon him? Inconclusive. But from Odin, Ku does inherit some new tricks. Funny enough, Ku as a Lancer already has Divinity B, which doesn't change when he becomes a Pseudo-Servant. This is because he is the son of the sun god, Lu. He gets Primeval Rune, an upgraded form of the runic magic he was taught by Skahawk, and his third skill eventually becomes At the Well, which is an upgraded version of the Disengage skill. This skill is story locked, so I do not know what happens to acquire it, but given this description, it has everything to do with him sacrificing himself to gain more power, and has some deep-rooted connection with the world tree Yggdrasil. Which, funny enough, is also his Bond CE, meaning that the spoiler for him being related to the Norse has been there all along. His noble phantasm is the Wicker Man, which is an entirely Celtic creation, supposedly. Funny enough, the main source of evidence for this ever actually being practiced comes from Julius Caesar's commentary on the Gallic War. However, the fact remains that this has little to do with Odin. As for who is personally in control, it is entirely Ku wielding Odin's authority, which raises the potential for a proper Odin servant in the future. Next up is Parvati, the consort to the Hindu god Shiva. She is described as a loving wife who is fully devoted to her husband but does not stand out on her own. She's good-natured, cheerful, kind to others, and a bright type of servant. The girl whom she is chosen to manifest inside of is none other than Mato Sakura, who shares the exact same qualities. The two merged for similar reasons as to why Ishtar merged with Rin, described as being on the same wavelength. Was there some dire reason or story-based plot development as to why she had to manifest as such? Not particularly. She appears in a not on fire Fuyuki, seemingly having manifested to get Sakura's school uniform, when you could just buy it for 1,000 mana prisms in the workshop and entirely cucking us out of a Medusa one. Like you made the art and you didn't release the costume. Bitterness aside, the two share very similar qualities and personality, so they fit well together, even in the nitty-gritty details. For example, both have the potential to harbor destruction within them. Shiva is often said to be married to a god of war, either Kali or Durga, and according to FGO, while these are different spirits who can be summoned individually, the reading of the spirit cores of Parvati, Kali, and Durga is pretty much identical, so she's like the innocent side of the trifecta. Sakura is like this in much the same way, normally appearing as a caring Kohai type character, but occasionally she shows a much darker nature, described gently as yandere tendencies, reaffirming that her competition is better. From this merger, however, Parvati did the opposite of what Kama did and took only the good side of Sakura and enhanced it, removing Sakura's shyness and introverted nature. Parvati grants upon her vessel much of her authority. She has a B-rank divinity, the ability Ashes of Kama, taken from the legend of Kama's destruction for the sake of Parvati's love, Blessings of the Goddess, which is fairly self-explanatory through its name, and her noble phantasm is Trishula Shakti, which is her actually utilizing the authority of her husband Shiva through the use of his spear. But she alters it to include aspects of her love goddess authority by adding a charm effect. The only thing that Sakura really brings to the table is her imaginary around ability, that becomes enhanced through Parvati's authority. For the most part, Parvati is the one in control, and while the pair is similar, the timid nature of Sakura is a key part of her personality, so removing that is a substantial enough change for me to say that the personality and control is Parvati over Sakura, though Sakura does appear to have some influence. Next up is Muramasa. Muramasa is one of the most famous blacksmiths not just in Japan, but in the world, having supposedly forged a demonic blade to be used to kill the Tokugawa. He has been summoned in the body of Shiro Emiya to at first act as a member of the counterforce, but then again in the Lost Belt scenarios. This merger is very unique for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that Muramasa is not a divine being. He was merely a blacksmith with legendary abilities. With that said, he does harbor inside of him not just his vessel, but also that of two gods, Hodir, the blind god of Norse myth, and Susanoo, the Japanese sea god. However, he is not considered a high servant. Why is that? I couldn't tell ya. The third of these is about his vessel, Shiro Emiya. Their connection together is quite good and explored through in-game postulation. The character of Shiro Emiya was taken in by Kiritsuga Emiya and raised in Magecraft. I do not have 20 hours to explain this whole story, but know that he aims to be a hero of justice and that it leads him to his death, in various scenarios, sometimes allowing for him to join the counterforce as the heroic spirit we now know as Emiya. Regardless, I don't believe that he is destined to live a very long life. However, it is said that should he have lived a longer life, his personality would match up exactly to what Muramasa's is. A somewhat grouchy old man who is stern, a touch bitter, but lovable nonetheless. In fact, it is speculated by both Muramasa and Parvati that Shiro is a descendant of Muramasa's, hence why their connection is so strong. The skills they now share together are as follows. Magic resistance, likely from Emiya, territory creation, originally from Emiya but upgraded as the territory being created as a blacksmith shop over a mage's workshop, sword appreciation, coming from Muramasa's keen eye for quality, Ominous Present Head, allowing for bonus damage against king enemies derived from the myth that Muramasa's swords were made to kill the Tokugawa. Sword Trial is an ability made for a blacksmith derived from the testing of the quality of the sword through practice slices. Eye of Karma is an evolution of an ability that Shiro had, being clairvoyance, but has been altered by Muramasa's sense to capture karma in his life through the flame, which brings us to our final skill, simply called Flame, which is essentially the essence of a blacksmith, one who forges with fire using their entire body. His noble phantasm is the culmination of all the work that Muramasa put in, the perfect sword, Sumikari Muramasa, the same sword used to kill Amakusa Shiro in Shimosa at the hands of Musashi. It is a sword that can sever karma itself. As for how well the fusion is, it is clear that Muramasa is the one in control, but it is also stated that as far as personalities go, Shiro would essentially be him if he grew old, so take that as you will for their merging. Next up is Ryogi Shiki. I went into this in the beginning, but Shiki is just Shiki. She falls into the classification of living human, being a pseudo-servant who has been summoned as themselves. Not that living humans can't have others inside of them as well, as is the case of Waver, Sima Yi, and Sitonai. These are characters that exist with little in-game reasoning and are more the blatant versions of adding characters simply because. For the most part though, they are given the reasoning of either having interacted with the protagonist and that's enough to summon them, or they physically just follow you back to Chaldea via race shifting. Or you can be confusing like Eris and not be dubbed a pseudo-servant but also have the Grim Reaper in you while you use a sacred Japanese spear. It's a lot. But we're talking about Shiki, dammit. She hails from the Type Moon series Kara no Kyokai, which is closer in tone to Fate Zero than the usual goofiness of FGO. Here is how she became a servant. When humanity was incinerated, the city in which Shiki lived, Mifune City, was destroyed as well. Shiki was caught up in this but managed to survive, kind of. She was put into the position of being moments before death and sealed into her own dream. In her dream, the city is fine and she resides within an apartment complex. However, she is aware that she is in a dream, but should she wake up, she will die. So she remains within her dreams. I believe that it is because of this that she is able to be summoned as a servant in Chaldea. She is dead, but also not. Somewhat of an anomaly in the system, something kind of like astral projection. At least, that is for her assassin form. Her saber form, affectionately called Void Shiki, is different. She is able to be summoned because we caught a glimpse of this Shiki in a dream. By all accounts, she is the same person as the Assassin Shiki, but their personalities are fundamentally different. Assassin Shiki is described in-game as being cat-like. She goes and does as she pleases, seems a bit out there, but is cute nonetheless. Her saber form makes her more of an older sister-type character, somewhat listless but more mature. While they are the same person, the reason they can be summoned separately is because they are different facets of the same personality. Just go watch Kara no Kyokai. Next up is the impish loli, merged with the Chinese tactician, Reines or Sima Yi. Sima Yi was a key player in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which included other popular characters currently in FGO such as Zhuge Liang, Lu Bu, and Chen Gong. Not Guan Yu though. Lasagna doesn't like us enough for that. Not Cao Cao either. Sorry. Anyway, Sima Yi is described in Fate as holding Zhuge Liang as his nemesis, which is funny considering how they appear in FGO. I will be completely honest with you all and say that I am not an expert in the field of the Three Kingdoms because there's a lot there. So, if there are major altercations made in her personality, such as the rivalry between the two being trumped up, let me know. Regardless, Sima Yi decided to possess a person for what appears to be to match his rival. He possessed the young Clock Tower Lord candidate Reines Elmalloy Archistort, so that he may better become acclimated to the modern world. Reines seems to be a good choice for him as well, as she is someone who is calculating like a tactician. She appears easygoing and kind to talk with, but in reality is in a constant state of examination and planning. But I digress. She is the niece of Cainith Elmalloy Archibald, who was the Master of Lancer in Fate Zero, the former Lord of the Mineralogy Department, and the guy on the Volume Hydrangea CE. After his death, spoilers, Reines becomes the adoptive sister to Waver Velvet. This is likely where the connection between Reines formed with Sima Yi, almost in a chain summoning of sorts triggered by Zhuge Liang's presence. Regardless, the two have merged together with Sima Yi willingly taking the back seat and acting more as a second conscience and lending his power to Reines. We see this with our interactions with her, as well as through her skill set. From Sima Yi, Reines inherits an improved territory creation, as he was able to quite literally create advantageous territories for his armies. The riding skill, from the use of horses, due to his posthumous achievement of founding the Jin dynasty, what was originally the tactician's command skill has been upgraded to Command of Emperor Zhuan of Jin, making it more potent but reducing his personal damage in the process. As with all Tactician servants, she is given the skill Tactician's Advice, but due to Reynes being a cunning person even before the merger, its rank is not reduced. From Reynes, the pair also gets the use of the skill Supreme Mystic Code Volume Hydrangea. This is an inherited Mystic Code that is capable of both offensive and defensive capabilities, but most importantly, made ones. Sima Yi's Noble Phantasm is the unspoken formation, which exposes the enemy's weakness and crushes its strengths. However, this is enhanced thanks to the merger with Sima Yi, adding the addition of the sea with the Volume Hydrangeum, allowing for the reduction of mana around them and weaponizing the land, all in the pursuit to gain an advantage. As a pseudo-servant though, this is pretty much just Reynes, and I want Shimamu to get a swimsuit. Like, seriously, look at how she blushes. She needs it. Now would you look at that, it's Sitonai in her third video, making me believe that she is one of the most traded out characters in this game. She is a high servant, which if you don't really know what that is, I have a full video on the subject, but put simply, she is a servant made up of 3 divine spirits inhabiting one body, all lending some power to the host. Sitonai is one such example, composed of the Ainu warrior girl Sitonai, the Finnish witch Louhi, and the Norse goddess Freya, all inhabiting the body of Iliasfil von Einsburn. Of these 4, Sitonai is the one who emerges as the dominant personality, having picked Ilia, specifically from the Fate Stay Night scenarios or one of the ones like that, not the same Ilia from Fate Khalid, due to them sharing similar fates. Both were young girls given an impossible task by their clan and born in a cold, unforgiving land. She is summoned into the Second Lost Belt at the same time as Napoleon, but is captured and imprisoned by Scotty. The reason for their summoning was to help in the correction of the Lost Belt, and the choosing of the vessel was done in agreement with the 3 divine spirits. Plus, Ilia is able to be summoned thanks to her own personal link to the Holy Grail. From Ilia herself, she is able to summon Heracles Berserker. Momentarily, mind you, solidifying her connection to the Fate Stay Night Ilia. But other than this, she gets her skills passives and Noble Phantasm from the spirits within her. From Louhi, she gets the passives Territory Creation, which has a connection with her making camps in caves and in the darkness. She gets a B-rank item construction and a Noble Phantasm that is not used in-game, called Pojola Fimble, which rids the area of night and day and sets the world in a stagnant state. From Freya, she gets a skill not used in-game called Crimson Gold, which is taken from the fact that Freya would attract the attention of all around her, and as such she would shed red tears of gold for the one who she truly loved. If this appeared in-game, it would be a taunt skill. From Sitonai herself, she gets the remainder of her kit. To start, despite harboring 3 goddesses, she has B-rank divinity thanks to her being a pseudo-servant. The skill Snow Fairy is one that is evolved from Ilia's Child of Nature skill, enhanced by the merger. This skill can freeze anything that Sitonai wishes, though she uses it for defense primarily. Emotional freezing is the ability to freeze one's heart to perform the task at hand, increasing her attack or defense as she needs. Finally, she has the skill Kamui Yukar, which is a personal chant that allows Sitonai to channel the power of the Kamui, which are similar to Japanese Kami in Ainu myth. Her Noble Phantasm is originally belonging to Sitonai, but becomes enhanced by the other goddesses possessing her. It is her loyal dog turned bear, Shiro. He became a bear because both Louhi and Freya agreed that a goddess's familiar must be fierce, so in a 2-to-1 vote, he became a bear. He is an always active Noble Phantasm, but when his true name is invoked, Sitonai is able to recreate her legend of slaying the dragon. With her dog bear named after a Fate character, she shoots down her adversary. Now, the game states that Ilia is the primary personality involved in this, but from her voice lines and in-game interactions, I feel like she and Sitonai have merged personalities, with Ilia appearing more prominent, but Sitonai is still showing through. The other 2 are not absent from her though, as she often mentions how they are discussing what next to do or their own reactions to things in her voice lines, so I'm going to put her into the category of being a new personality. Next up is another high servant, that being Session Kiara. This Kiara is the same one that we kill at the end of the CCC event, left to sink to the bottom of the Mariana Trench after her plans as a beast were foiled. But how did she survive, let alone manifest, as not just a pseudo-servant, but a high servant? Minor spoilers for the 2020 FGO summer event. This all falls back on the fact that Kiara has a skill called Independent Manifestation, which is a skill that allows for a servant to maintain themselves without the magical energy of a master, and as such can also manifest somewhere without external magical energy to support them. Merlin uses this exact same skill to appear wherever he likes. Well, while Kiara was independently manifesting, she was killed by Zhu Fu, but rather than being sent back to the Throne of Heroes or Chaldea, she was sent back to her body at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. While there, she found the fossil of a Shen, a divine beast that looks like a massive clam that would cause mirages to appear on the surface. Note that it is considered a dragon as well that can shapeshift. Kiara ate the fossil and merged with it, then swam to the surface. While on her way, she also ate a school of mermaids and merged with them. Then for her final component, she wished to use this opportunity to redo her childhood, and thus Kiara Lily was formed. In the process, she sealed her memories and believed herself to be merged with the legendary Buddhist nun Yao Bikuni. Now, this may solve a mystery as to why she does not appear as a pseudo-servant on the fandom website. It is because she is not truly a pseudo-servant because she did not consume Yao Bikuni, but rather just a school of mermaids. However, it is indicated that Yao Bikuni did merge into her at some point, so it's a bit of a muddy territory. You may be asking who Yao Bikuni is, so allow me to explain. She was a young girl who ate the flesh of a mermaid, specifically a niño, which is a fish with a human face, not knowing that it was one. The result was that she gained immortality and lived for 800 years as a Buddhist nun before eventually succumbing to grief and killing herself. However, through this merger, Kiara has become a bit more mellowed out. Though Kiara herself is a bodhisattva, the influence of a more, shall I say, pious nun seems to have affected her in a positive way. She has a number of skills that have been bolstered by her merger, such as a territory creation due to her acquiring a mystery, otherworld creation, likely from the Shen, and Logos creator, a personal skill of Kiara's that was dampened through the merger. Her active skills are Clam Palace, very clearly taken from the Shen, Divine Power Inc., which is actually kind of a funny one because it's taken from Hokusai Saber after Kiara took an interest in it in Chaldea. Finally, she has Mermaid's Flesh, which is inspired by the story of Yao Bikuni. Her noble phantasm is a joint effort from all of her interior forms, using the Shen primarily to trap the enemy in an illusory world, but then uses the immortal powers of the Niño to outlast them while they wither away, drowning in the pleasures created by Kiara. There are some questions about this character's design that should be explained as well, namely her appearance and class. For the first ascension, she is merely in a swimsuit, excited to experience the summer as she was unable to in her youth. Her second ascension is Kiara Lily's approximation of a magical girl. Her third ascension has to do with Kiara's own fixation on the Little Mermaid, donning a mermaid cosplay to appear closer to her parents, though it is noted that a certain Shoto would likely rip her a new one if he saw her dressed as such. Finally, we get to her class, that being the Moon Cancer class. I can't find a reason for why this is, but I can give you my best estimations. At the end of the CCC event, Kiara had all but merged with the underwater substation, as she was dragging it to the bottom. When she respawned in this body after Zhufu killed her, she likely merged with parts of the substation once again. There is also the chance that she took this class with the sole purpose of spiting BB, hence why when she is summoned, she has a unique animation where she destroys BB. As for who is in control, it's Kiara, whose personality has been influenced by Yao Bikuni to a degree. Our final pseudo-servant is none other than our teacher himself, Zhuge Liang, merged with Waver Velvet, aka Lord El Malloy II. Or, as I will just be calling him for simplicity's sake, Waver. Waver is a prominent character across Fate as the Master of Iskander in Fate Zero, and a Lord of the Clock Tower as he grew older. Zhuge Liang was a legendary strategist from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms era of China. He becomes merged with Zhuge Liang because he deemed it unnecessary to fully manifest. So he chose a vessel that knew much about the modern world, while also being an intelligent and influential mage himself. Thus he picked Waver, and rather than taking over fully, allowed for the vessel to retain full control while he sat in the subconscious, observing and assisting as needed. Zhuge Liang is a being of rationalism, and as such, the merger with Waver seems to have been a solid one, as this is an attribute that they share. It is rather fitting to have Waver be the final character in this list, as in his first interlude he explains the fundamental differences between pseudo-servants and demi-servants. Together, the pair are better suited for supporting others than actually fully participating in the fight. He is a strategist whose main goal is to extract the full potential of his soldiers, and this shows in his skills. He has the Discerning Eye skill, the ability to view the potential in others and get them to use it. Advice of the strategist is the ability on how best to avoid the attacks of the enemies, and Tactician's Command is his recommendation on how to best take them down. Much like Sima Yi, his territory creation comes from the literal ability to create advantageous territory for himself and others. Finally, from Zhuge Liang, he has the Unreturning Formation, the creation of a stone maze to entrap the enemy's army and weaken them. From Waver himself, he is a powerful mage, so it comes from his attacks, the use of elemental magic to damage his enemies, though in all honesty, they can do more with these and he deserves an animation update in the future. The game states that he is a new personality, but in interactions he is indistinguishable from Waver Velvet. As for why he appears younger in his third ascension, it is said that it is because he was cursed by Steno and Uriel. In reality, it is a formation of a concept that appears as how he once was, known as Saint Graph Re-Advent, but overall, Waver is just Waver. The main takeaway from this series is that Taiga is still somehow more of a goddess than everyone else. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought down in the comments, like the videos, it really does help out the channel, subscribe to catch these as they go up, follow my Twitch for significantly less structured content, I also have a Twitter, but for now, keep your chin up, peace.